western region of Ghana identified as miserably poor despite its resources in oil exploration, cocoa and timber trade.
When we looked at the western region, we actually found that it was below the national average. So that gives you an idea that compared to the national level, you're doing worse. If you're looking at the western region in particular, are the right decisions being made? And this is where not only the policymakers, but also the civil society organizations and yourselves as media, because you were all part of this launch, can also be looking to see, well, okay, you know, when decisions are made to invest in certain programs and to invest in certain infrastructure projects, will that respond to the priority?
According to the United Nations Development Programme 2013 Human Development Report, the challenge of poor infrastructure development and high levels of poverty in the region are contributing to the high levels of migration of the local people to other big cities in search of jobs and education. My name is Bright Nanamfo, and this is today's big story. Thanks so much for staying there. The Western Region Human Development Report 2013 was launched by the UNDP in collaboration with the Western Regional Coordinating Council. The Western Region is one of Ghana's unique regions endowed with natural resources such as cocoa and timber, the highest concentration of minerals. The latest addition to its resources is oil exploration, which is currently ongoing at the Jubilee field. However, despite the abundance of these resources in the region and its contribution to the national economy, the region's road network and other infrastructure are the worst and least developed in the country, especially within the mining and cocoa growing areas, according to the UNDP report.
This development is not the responsibility of just the government or the regional coordinating council. It is everybody's responsibility. So this is how we need to make sure that we're all looking to see how we contribute. I think this is where it's the whole issue of dialogue, and it's what the people in the Western region, what the media, you know, advocating to see what the follow-up is. I think, you know, for us, the results of a development report is only in terms of when the recommendations are really implemented. Now, that won't happen overnight, but that's where you need to then see, well, okay, what are the different policies that are being put into place? You know, can you have a greater dialogue between the district assemblies? Can there be greater discussion between the citizens in the Western region and the district assemblies as to how the resources are being used? You know, you have the DACF funds, the GET funds, etc. Are they being put into areas that concern human development in the region? So that's the type of action that we would really like to promote. And we can't say whether the oil findings have made a difference. And we can't say that because we didn't have these types of indicators. So, you know, when people say that oil is good for the Western region, we cannot say because we don't have the statistics, we don't have the information to be able to make that comparison from before and now. So which is why now we're saying that, okay, use this as a baseline. Oil will be continued to be managed in Ghana for over, at least I'm sure, over the next decade or so. So the idea would be to come back and to take a look maybe 10 years down the road, because human development doesn't happen in 1 year either. You know, you have to, it takes some time. So come back 10 years down the road, but at least you would have something to be able to measure it by and to see whether difference was made.
The report draws attention to the rapid increase in urbanization with low urbanized districts and the high incidence of migration of the local people to other city centers. Paramount Chief for the Western Nsema traditional area, Awulai Anoaje III, regrets the situation as depressing.
That once we have a lot of natural resources in the region, at least there must be some allocation of the resources for the development of the human resource in the region and the physical infrastructure. I think it's in the right direction, but the specific issues are that we are dealing with, you know, a national constitution that talks about how resources in the region have to be utilized. And as I said, the national constitution vests the natural resources, I mean gold, diamond, etc., in the president on behalf of the people of Ghana. So if there is no arrangement that addresses that one, where resources harnessed in Western region, a certain quantum will have to be set aside specifically to address the deficit in our human resource development and the fiscal development. Then it will be difficult for this to be done without people taking the law into their own hands. And I think that for me, this is an area that we need to address. And we can do it better if all the stakeholders, I mean chiefs, the youth, etc., are able to come together in a forum to address this concern and then make an appeal to the right authority or duty bearers to look at this area of concern. And that is the sad aspect. It means that there are 2 or 3 hangovers that we have not dealt with. One, either people who are coming to harness the resource bring in some labor force from outside. I can cite the case of Senopec, that is working on a gas processing plant. They brought in some Chinese labor force. So if, for instance, the people in the Western region or Ghana, are struggling for employment there, and they already have some of these people there, they will definitely not, employ you. So you have to look for employment elsewhere because you can't live in poverty all the time.
In the context of human development in the region, the report indicates the Human Development Index in the region is 0.4%, which is below the national average of 0.46. The population of the region, described as living in severe poverty as of 2011, is pegged at 21.3% compared to the national figure of 11.4. In the area of education, the report shows that though there is high enrollment in basic schools, while senior, high and tertiary enrollment is low due to lack of enough schools in the region. Awulai Ano Ajayi III has some solutions.
Poverty in the midst of plenty is the worst thing that can happen to people. Now, it can also be that because of lack of skills, lack of education, etc., they do not have the necessary skill or education to be employed. And therefore, they will have to gravitate to area where maybe using their ordinary labor, they may be able to care for themselves and their families. That is why maybe some of them are gravitating towards other areas. Yes. What can be done is for all of us, all duty bearers, the chiefs, the parents, and to ensure that one, they spend money on educating their children. You don't just give birth to children and then leave them without giving them adequate and skill or education. So we have to do that. Apart from that, there can be other organizations who may be interested in trying to put a fund aside to provide scholarship schemes to support students to go to school to a higher level. So some of these interventions can be done to be able to address the deficit in education in our rural areas.
And the report is expected to be used by policymakers in accelerating the rate of progress of human development for the region's citizens and also enable the region make rapid progress towards the attainment of the MDGs in 2050. Now, the Western region is described as miserably poor despite its resources, and latest being the oil exploration there. Let's go to the phone lines now. Now, Mohammed, Asar Mohammed, is a lecturer at the University of Development Studies, the WA campus there, and he just joined me online. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you very much, Bryce. How are you?
I'm good, Mohammed. Hope you're fine too. Now, the Western region can be described as a region with a lot of resources, cocoa, timber, oil exploration just started. How can that region be described as poor? What has gone wrong?
Yes, Bryce, thank you very much for this opportunity, and my regards to all your listeners. I think the Western region can best be described in contemporary development as the paradox of plenty. And we have always said that that is the issue of resource scarce. The Western region in Ghana is the region that should have not been a region we can talk of poverty, especially if you look at the areas of indicators or the indicators that the UNDP has used in the area of sustainable livelihood, in the area of capacity and governance. And if you look at this region, as you mentioned, we have gold. I can say up to 80% of the gold and then other minerals that we have in this country are produced in this region. We have timber, and not only timber alone, but forest. The major components of the forest products are coming from this region. So you can see that this is a region that somebody cannot describe as poor, looking at the current circumstances. But unfortunately, that is the picture. And everybody has attested to that the region is poor in terms of even sustainable livelihood, is poor in terms of human development indicators such as education, roads, and even maternal mortality and other issues. And I've always said that this is a region that we need to be very careful, especially the discovery of the oil and gas in recent times. You know, I've always said that there have been a lot of expectations of this oil and gas. And as a result of these expectations, there have been a lot of negative growth in terms of what in some of the indicators. For instance, people have increased rent. If you go to the western region, particularly in the urban areas, rent has more or less doubled. The cost of food has doubled. If you look at the issue of even education, people are now charging more, especially the private education institutions are charging more. They are all doing all these things just because they are expecting that the oil and gas is bringing money.
Does it?
But the truth of the matter is that is that really bringing money? Has it really brought money to the people?
Does it, Mohammed? Hold on. Let me just bring in this now. We agree, like you said, that the region has resources and yet poor. What or where can we place the blame? Is it that the central government is taking these resources and not leaving enough to adequately develop the region? Where can we put a finger?
Trace it, I think, yes. So, Bright, that's where I was actually landing at the end of the day. That, yes, in the midst of all these resources, the question is why? And number one reason has been the poor or the failure of policy. If you look at the forest sector, for instance, and if you look at the formula for sharing forest revenue in this country, now you've realized that the Forestry Commission takes about 60% of the forest revenue.
Right.
The remaining amount that comes, if you look at the distribution for the region, or sorry, the district, you see that the communities, or for that matter, the districts, get little. At the end of the day, that particular resource as forest that other countries or other regions in the world are using to develop, we are not developing the share of that revenue or that resource to the people who are living in this resource. It's just something negligible. And there's a high level of corruption even in the distribution formula.
Right, even when these resources have to be distributed between central government and the various regions, you're talking about corruption there.
Yes.
Right.
Instance,
Mohammed, hold the line. I'll let you cite the examples, but don't drop your line here. Let me speak to Matthias Kwame Nto. He's a member of parliament for Awin in the Western region. Mr. Nto, thanks so much for your time.
You're welcome, sir.
Now, can you describe your constituency, Awin, as poor?
Thank you very much. Awin is poor.
How poor is Awin?
Yeah, predominantly we are farmers, and the land that we occupy some years back were leased to we call them stranger farmers, people who are not indigenous. And the negotiations that were put in place in those days was not the best. So it happened that the strangers had gotten a greater part of the land and are farming it with cocoa. Now, at the end of the day, when they get the produce, when it is sold, all the money is taken to their hometowns, leaving the place very deplorable. Even if some of them are putting up buildings, it will be at the cottage side, that is on the farmland.
Right.
And therefore, you find that the indigenous themselves, the amount that they get out of the produce for the year is very minimal. So that's why people have been living. It makes them to be very poor. And now they cannot take the land back because their ancestors or their forefathers have already signed those agreements with the stranger farmers. And that's why the district is poor.
And the UNDP report 2013 on the Western region says that a lot of the youth are simply leaving. Is that the case in your constituency?
Exactly so. You see, nowadays, the youth want permanent employment. And therefore, if that is not forthcoming, then the alternative is to leave that vicinity to the urban areas or the urban centers where they can get jobs to do, which is non-existent. But they don't care. So far as the person is not living in the village and it's in the urban center, it doesn't matter whether the person is employed or not. There are hosts of the youth here in Accra who are seeking for employment, and they are not getting it. Yet, if you ask them to go back, they say, no, it's better we stay here because over there at the district, we will not get any job doing it. They will have to depend on the parents who are taking care of them up to the age of, say, 20 or 23. So that's what is happening.
Now, is this situation in Awin the same as perhaps the whole of the region? And you are a member of parliament. How do we begin to reverse this trend?
Thank you very much. You see, Ghana is a unitary state. And every resource that is found in and on the land of Ghana belongs to the state, except that it has been put in the trust of the chiefs, the traditional rulers. So what government has to do is maybe strategize and get avenues for more jobs. Now, you find that when the children exit from the JSS, some of them who do not make it to the secondary school and to the universities are becoming liabilities. So these vocational institutions must be spread all over the country. And therefore, those who want to learn any trade, being a carpentry, masonry, whatever that person wants to do, that child will have access to it. And that will minimize the dependence on government jobs, which is non-existent. You see, so this is one area that government can come in to ensure that the youth are also gainfully employed. But you find that we are all aware of what is happening in the country. Kumasi University of Science and Technology was meant for technical aspects. What do we see today? Go to Cape Coast, it's meant for teachers. What do we see today? Go to Winneba, the same thing. You see, and therefore we need to rejuvenate the mandate that were given to these institutions, so that we go back to the root and continue to look at what the mandate, the original mandate was, and then stick to that. I think that will make a way for a lot of our youth to be carefully employed and will not depend on government for the non-existent job which they are seeking.
Matthias, to hold on, I'll come back to you. Now, Mohammed, lecturer at the University of Development Studies, the WA campus. Now, you were citing some examples why you think the region finds itself in this situation.
Yes, I was just pointing to the unfair distribution of the natural resources, and I was pointing to the way the region is not getting its fair share from the forest sector in particular.
Right.
And I was giving you the formula of distributing the forest revenue, where at the end of the day, the community people or the district in which these forests are located are not getting their fair share. So those are some of the issues that I was talking about, transparency and corruption and accountability issues there. Not that the resource is not translating into the life of the people, but it's the way it is managed. And that needs to be really looked at. I think my honorable member talked about a very important issue about educational reforms, and I think that's one of the recommendations that I would not like to labor much on what he said, but I think vividly what he said is more important. And you can take it for mostly, if you look at the employment, unemployment rate in the country, taken from the 2000 population census, and you can compare it to the 2010 population census.
Right.
You see the trend of unemployment. And if you look at the trend of unemployment in the country, and particularly the Western region is one of the areas where we have seen that trend, you see that there's more unemployment in the formal, public sector. And that is tracing to the fact that the public sector has not much what they call capacity to employ. You can see that there's rather less unemployment in the informal private sector. So it means that most Ghanaians, in particular, that region, are being employed in the informal sector. But why are we still talking about poverty when people are employed? Then the question is, what is the nature of the informal private sector? The capacity issues are quite low, and you can look at the UNDP report. They have talked about low capacity issues there. It means that the youth, in particular in the area, are employed to an extent in informal sector, but the sector is not really organized in a way that can really let them come out of poverty in terms of even the arrangement of their shops. If you go to most of the markets in those localities, especially in the Western region, you see that people are interested in to go into enterprise development, but the assemblies or maybe government in the state is not really propelling that sector in terms of investing in infrastructure. We need to really invest in the infrastructure so that people who are interested, especially those graduates who are unemployed in the formal sector, will want to probably go into the informal sector, but they need to really be supported in terms of infrastructure development in those areas. So these are some of the things that need to be done using the resources, and that's what I want to learn on. Like the region has a potential, and the potential is that it is sitting on a lot of resources that has the potential to be utilized. And therefore, we need to just reform the system and make sure that we reduce the corruption and then make sure that we have a more accountable way of distributing the resources in that region.
I'll come back to you, but let me speak to the Honourable Member of Parliament for Awene. Now, Mr. Anto, this is a region that began exploration of oil some years ago. Do you think that the region should find itself in this situation? How do we use this resource to push the Western region out of that poverty we're talking about now?
Yeah, thank you very much, my brother. You know, yesterday somebody was making some analysis and was describing the Western region as a quarrying site where they take the stones away and then a big hole is left. Where it rains, it is filled with water and becomes a lake. That's what is happening in the Western region. I like what my good brother was saying. The first resource of any country or any other area, community, is the human resource. Very, very important. Now, we are aware that the oil has come from the Western region. We have witnessed cocoa, timber, gold, and other mineral resources, but they were not used for the development of the area. So now, what the Western region is calling on government to do is to ensure that part of this resource is used to develop the place. Even if the youth, because they are not skilled, or a lot of them are not skilled, cannot be employed in that sector, that the resources or the money that is accruing from this oil exploitation should be used to develop the place. You find that just last week, I was in Nkrofo. We went to the gas processing company site where they are putting up the machines for the processing of the gas. But the road that leads to the place is very, very bad. So we're asking the CEO, this is a very important government project, but look at the road. And they confessed that yes, it is true, and that they're making every effort to ensure that the road is put in proper perspective so that it can be used. Because apparently they were even sending some machines, but because of the weight, they couldn't use the bridges that are on that road. These are the areas we are talking about. That was one of the main reasons the chiefs or the traditional rulers of the Western region were requesting government to give us 10% of the oil resource. Anyway, it was the best. But we are backing them simply because they took our cocoa to develop other areas. They took our timber, they took our gold, they took our food, everything to develop other areas. This time around, I think this is our last chance. So we need to put our heads together as a united front and then push happen to ensure that the resources that are being exploited in the Western region is also used to develop the place. However, if you look at the road network, we have about 40,000 roads in the Western region that are not usable, if I may term it that way. Now that it's raining, You may visit the Western region to see. Go to my constituency. Lots of the roads are not usable. You cannot use it. There are no bridges. There are no culverts. The people walk long distances to cut their the farm produce to the nearest market. So it's a big problem. This is what I was telling the people that gathered there. MP is not supposed to control roads, but I'm forced to do it because my people living in poverty. There's no way out. So I have to force myself. So this is the situation in the Western region.
Right.
So yesterday I was very, very gladdened. My heart was gladdened for the report that was presented by my good professor and the team. So what is happening is the implementation, the way forward. What do we do to reverse the situation in the Western region? Because we have been left in the dark for a very long time.
Thank you so much for speaking to Matthias Kwame Nto. He's a member of Parliament for Awe. Let me wrap up with Mohammed as our lecturer from the University of Development Studies, WA campus. Now, I let the MP go, but just before that, I asked him that the oil that is being explored in the region, how do we use it? How do we use it to reverse what is happening now? He talks about the fact that there was cocoa. He talked about the fact there was timber, and yet the region did not benefit. Can they benefit from the oil? How do we do it?
Yes, for instance, I was just making a proposal that if you look at the oil, you cannot just rely on the revenue of the oil for total development. You have to take advantage of the industry and then use what we call radial development. And that way, you can propose that we improve the agriculture sector there. The youth actually would like to go into agriculture. Particularly, if you look at oil-producing countries, there are specific vegetables that are very demandable by these oil companies and then the light companies. In that matter, you improve the roads. I think the MP talked about that. I've traveled around the whole Western region, and you can see that the issues of roads are very important for the development. If you're trying to see how you improve agriculture to be linked to the oil industry, you need to really think of improving the roads. And that's the one proposal that I will make there. You also need to think about alternative livelihoods.
Right.
It is very clear, and it has become so obvious that the fisher folk in the Western region, and I've done a little study on that, and I've come to a conclusion that livelihoods are being affected by the oil industry, not because the fisher folk are being stuck from the race, but people are turning their livelihoods from fishing to other non-existent livelihoods, with the hope that oil will bring certain fortunes. People are turning away from the oil, their traditional livelihoods. But in this case, which livelihoods are alternative here? We need to identify them, and we can only do this. And I'll propose that the Western region needs a clear development strategy.
Right.
I know they have been developing development strategies all along, but they need to now look at the current situation. Yes, the information has come out clear that the region is really underdeveloped on a number of indicators. Let's look at those indicators, interrogate them further, and see how they can develop a more strategic development agenda for the Western region, taking into consideration the resources that they have. And not only the natural resources, but they have a lot of people.
Right.
And I know we have a lot of people in the Western region who have the skills to be able to turn that region into a fortune for the future of the people in the Western region.
Right, thank you so much for speaking to me. Asad Mohammed is a lecturer at the University of Development Studies, WA campus there, talking to me. He's done a lot of work across the length and breadth of his country, research work, and the Western region is one of the areas he's actually done that work. This ends the first part of the show. It's a Friday. The second part would have a lot of issues that would have to do with you, and that's the interactive segment with the lady Maria. She's joining me in a moment. Thanks so much for being part of the first segment. We're coming back stronger in the second segment. See you right there.